And on that note, David, let's get started.
Well, thank you, Catherine. And, I suppose if you're looking for one comfort in this story, as bad as the gerrymandering in our state legislative map is, the gerrymandering in our congressional map is even worse. So you can at least take comfort in that. All right. One of the things that really strikes me, having spent some time looking at the Ohio map, everybody here knows about some of the most ridiculously shaped districts, and and the 9th district on the lake from Cleveland to Toledo, and Jordan's district, and these district shapes that when we pull back and look at the entirety of the state, we say, well, that's hard to defend. But one of the points I want to emphasize, because you have to really zoom in to appreciate how these shapes are constructed, is that they're done in some cases literally a house at a time. And this is a slide I call your own personal congressional district. Say you're the type of person who really doesn't like your neighbors, doesn't really want to have their vote have anything to do with who your member of Congress is. Ohio has a district for that. You can live at 5800 Renner Road and look out your side door and see dozens of houses right next door that are in a different district. Or you can look out the other side of your house and see houses that are in another district. And you think about how the obsessive care that went into the construction of these districts. In this case, the shaded area is the 3rd district in Franklin County. The 15th district is unshaded, where 5800 Renner Road is. So say you don't like your neighbors, we have a district for that. On the next slide, I'll note, say you don't like your spouse or your kids. Ohio has a district for that. In some cases, the line cuts right through a house, as is the case at 1277 West Galbraith in Cincinnati. If you look at this, literally, the front half of the house is in one district, the back half of the house is in a different. So, the living room, the kitchen, and so forth are in the 1st district, the back bedrooms in the 2nd district. This is the degree to which these lines were drawn, zigzagging through Ohio neighborhoods. And, I show these to highlight the absurdity of the map, but there's a larger point here, which is there is a real cost in terms of confusion, in terms of, interference with the most basic aspects of representation. And by that, I mean, in the case of Franklin County, we now know that the County Board of Elections misclassified thousands of residents into the wrong congressional district. How'd they do that? Why'd they do that? Well, it's hard to keep track of where everybody is when the line goes house by house, and where you may be in the same town, you may be in the same township, you may be in the same school district, you may be in the same everything, but at 58 Renner Road, you're not in the same congressional district. So they got it wrong. In the case of Cincinnati, we've actually had situations where the Board of Elections has disagreed with itself about what district a house is in, so that when you call on Monday, you might get a different answer than when you call on Tuesday. That shouldn't be. But of course, it's by design. It's, a residue of a process that was created without an interest in representation, without an interest in fairness, without an interest, more fundamentally, in just having something that can be understood. And if the professionals at the Board of Elections can't figure this out, how is a voter to figure this out? How is a voter to know and understand where they fit in this whole process? Those folks at 5800 Renner Road, they look outside and there's yard signs for congressional candidates in the front yard of their neighbors, people they can't vote for. This is, fundamentally productive of confusion and a hindrance, a hurdle to representation. On the next slide, you've heard this before, and I want to underscore how extraordinary this is. 10 years of this map, and it's undefeated. Undefeated. Not a single seat has turned over from a Republican to a Democrat or a Democrat to a Republican. You look across the country, Maine has had more turnover than Ohio. Maine has 2 congressional districts. We have 16. 0 turnover. This is an extraordinary accomplishment. This map is undefeated. It will retire. You know, its last election was 2020. It will retire undefeated. It's never been done to this degree, to draw a map for such a large state where there's been no turnover. And I want to emphasize a point on the next slide that really gets at the heart of things, which is, you know, all right, well, you know, the map in some ways is sort of self-fulfilling, that if you draw a hard enough district, maybe high quality candidates don't run and you don't get very much competition. So maybe, you know, if you had a better candidate, maybe these seats would have flipped over. Here's an accompanying fact. In the presidential races, 2012, 2016, 2020, none of these districts, none of them moved from voting for a Democrat to voting for a Republican or vice versa. Even though we had as a state, you know, a Democratic win in 2012, Republican wins in 16 and 20. All 16 districts lined up and voted for the party that they were in effect assigned to. So this tells you it has absolutely nothing to do with the quality of candidates. These districts performed as they were drawn to perform. And this is really an extraordinary, you know, sort of achievement in, you know, in controlling political outcomes. And when you look across the nation, you know, there were dozens of seats nationally that turned over in this last election. There were dozens of seats nationally that turned over in 2018. There were, you know, there were all kinds of examples in states, small and large, where it actually mattered, you know, that there was an election. That wasn't the case in Ohio. And, you know, I want to emphasize how extraordinary this is. I mean, we look at our map and we say, wow, this is taking things to a different level. You know, we kind of feel it. But the truth is, we can measure that, and it is taking things to a different level. If we go to the next slide here, this was accomplished by dividing people from their neighbors. This is a very fundamental answer of how was this done. And you saw it with those folks at Renner Road, and you saw it with those folks on Galbraith Road. From the old map that was in effect from 2001 to 2010 to our current map, there was a 59% increase in the splitting of census tracts between different congressional districts. The census tract is basically a couple thousand people that you live closest to. A 59% increase in splitting that unit. Now, a couple thousand people can fit inside of a congressional district very easily. You don't have to split them. In Iowa, in their current map, I use that Iowa example, big fan of that, they split 0 census tracts in their map. Our map splits 59% more in this iteration than the one before. That's splitting neighbor from neighbor. That's splitting neighborhoods in pieces. And of course, it's done in a way very strategically. And I'm randomly choosing folks for this. It works out that, you know, the majority party split census tracts that vote for the minority party at a rate literally 47% higher than they split census tracts that voted for their own party. This is done for a purpose. This is done very strategically. On the next slide, so what? And I can't emphasize enough, there are bottom line costs here. And here's your so what. We have lots of emerging research in political science that gets at the heart of a so what. If your neighborhood is split between congressional districts, there is an actual, tangible, measurable effect. You're less likely to know who the candidates are. You're less likely to know who the incumbent is. You're less likely to know who the challenger is. And what does that mean? It means that the accountability that's supposed to be baked in to the elections process is damaged. If I don't know who my representative is, you know, when I look out the window at 58 Renner Road and I see yard signs for candidates I can't vote for, if I don't know who that person is, how do I evaluate that person? How do I vote for or against them based on what they've done in office? Well, of course I can't. If I don't know who the alternatives are, how do I make a thoughtful judgment about that? Well, of course I can't. This is the residue This is just a direct 100% residue of trying to maximize maps. And this is why I said earlier that as court challenges may have been defeated by a Supreme Court that says, well, you can't challenge the relationship between votes and seats. I think one of the potential areas that we'll see challenges, maybe not necessarily in Ohio, maybe our map will be better than this, but one of the areas you might see challenges at a federal level going forward is the cost to your personal representation when you live in that situation where, you know, yours is a house that the Board of Elections doesn't even know what congressional district it is. Because of course you're confused about it. If the Board of Elections doesn't know what district you're in, how are you supposed to surmount this? So, you know, I give you this as just, this is one piece of the puzzle. This is one piece of a puzzle that says gerrymandering isn't just about the fact that minority votes can be translated into a majority of seats. It's bigger than that. It's about thwarting intent, thwarting voices. It's a hurdle to the most basic aspects of representation. If I am given a harder task in knowing who the candidates are, I'm giving a harder task to voting. And what does that mean as a bottom line? It means the representative can skate through with a weaker link to accountability.